We're good.
Okay, thank you. All right, so moving on to the next one. So why appreciative inquiry now? The fact that all of you have fives, I'm going to breeze through these really quickly because I feel like we'll be preaching to the choir. Appreciative inquiry is so important right now in these polarizing times. I'm going to speak from the perspective of being in the United States. A lot of initiatives that we have always advocated for have now been weaponized politically. Social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion. These things I have been taught are really what our goal should be. And I think there's a lot of misinformation going around. So what appreciative inquiry can do is ask the questions that need to be asked that can bring people together. Because there's so much of these deficit-based conversations, students are really caught in the middle because you have teachers on one side, parents on another, and there really shouldn't be any sides at all. So bringing people together to really be student focused, because I think if we have the right conversations at the right time with the right people, we'll understand that the majority of us want the same thing for students. It really has that potential to address these initiatives that now have become actually illegal in some states. To be talking about equity and inclusion, in certain states you cannot do that, or you cannot use certain terms. But if we talk about it through an appreciative lens, I'm pretty sure that's pretty neutral language as far as well, it's positive language, but it's neutral as far as having anybody having an issue with it. And really right now, K12 priorities, there's so many conversations right now talking about learning loss from the pandemic. The seniors that I'm teaching right now, I say to them, the first thing I said in the classroom, I said, I want you to understand that I appreciate that you have never had a normal high school experience. They were in 8th grade when the pandemic hit and there was a shutdown. And in their 4th marking period, if you did no work, it didn't matter. You still were able to go into the high school. And really that was a rite of passage that was lost. You know, middle school is a very tough time. And to be able to say, congratulations, you're moving on to the high school, we just kind of pushed them on. And as soon as they went into 9th grade, it was cohort learning, hybrid learning, online, at home, wearing masks. And that was their first experience in high school. And then once we started kind of going back to normal, bars were low, teachers were frazzled in doing online learning. And it was just kind of like, let's get them through, let's get them through. And so really, there's so much talking about learning loss. There's mental health issues that we're talking about. I've never had so many students talk about anxiety and their depression and coping mechanisms, which is good that they're able to talk about it. And I'm very grateful that the stigma has been removed. At the same time, now we have so much awareness of these emotional needs that we need to meet for the students. Also, the family engagement is a very big conversation right now. In working with schools in Oregon, it's actually a mandate for the Department of Ed in Oregon that they must have robust family community engagement as part of their strategic planning, which I think is excellent. And my experience is their definition of robust community engagement is different from mine, because I see how you can bring in appreciative inquiry and make it so authentic, and so much data can be collected in real time to fuel the next steps, where some people's understanding of engagement was, oh, well, we put out a survey. Oh, we had an open house. And it's like, there's so much more there that I would love to be able to bring this to schools. Another thing is staffing. Teachers are burnt out. They are leaving in so many ways, and it's really difficult to recruit and retain highly qualified staff. So those are the focuses right now in the conversations that are being had. And a lot of the way they're trying to solve problems is from that typical top-down model, where you have a couple of superintendents might get together as a district and across the district, maybe in a county. And what are we going to do? Let's disseminate information. And as you know, over on the right hand, where we are having questions and cross-pollinating ideas and co-creating an ideal future, that's the model that we're shifting towards, right? Another way of looking at it, and like I said, I'm going through this quickly because everyone said that there are 5, but in education, we are still operating in a system where we have a superintendent working with a cabinet, making recommendations to a school board, and they're voting, and it's anywhere from 9 to 12 different voters that will be then affecting 10,000 students and all their families. And to me, I just don't understand how we're still doing that type of industrial model when we know that appreciative inquiry could be facilitating conversations with diverse constituents and being a part of that decision-making process. And we know if you are part of the decision-making process, you will support it. And that's how we lead to transformational change. We are certainly coming out of a crisis, and we really need to be having these types of conversations. So if you think about belonging and psychological safety in the school settings, we really need to have people feel included, heard, and to feel that they fit in schools. You have a lot of historically marginalized groups who are saying that they want to be part of conversations, and there's a hesitancy and a fear sometimes to bring people to have conversations about race or emotions, mental health issues. But if you are doing it in asking and inviting questions about what they want to see, I have seen it time and again where it is a positive result. So what Heidi and I are doing as advocating for consultants is a couple of beliefs that we fundamentally have that we are trying to send out this message. First off, our book is called, Appreciative Inquiry, and it's curious leadership through appreciative inquiry. And so I love the word curious because you haven't decided the outcome yet, and you really want to know people's perspectives. And anybody can be a leader. A student can be a leader. A teacher can be a leader in education. You don't necessarily have to be an administrator to play a pivotal role. And someone was talking in the chat, the alignment of programming. We see so many different initiatives and they start to get siloed and splintered. But if we do that under a lens of how are all of these different initiatives working together to make sure that we are meeting this overarching question that we are discovering together. We're also calling for sustainable implementation of these initiatives. If you've been in education long enough, you'll see things come and go. You'll see different things come up later, a couple decades later, with just a different name. And so how can we make sure that what is being implemented will happen over time and it becomes part of the DNA of that school system? We also think that it's important to validate all voices, solicit them regularly. And I was mentioning again about the family community engagement and really to have safety, significance, and belonging. So at the end of this session, once I unpack the T.R.A.I.L framework, I will be asking you, what part of T.R.A.I.L do you think has the most potential to fulfill this need? So thinking about that I'm going to ask you that after I go through all of the framework and the breakdown. Okay? Which part of T.R.A.I.L do you think has the most potential to fulfill that need? All right, so some metaphors on this T.R.A.I.L is Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. I don't know if people are familiar with that, but in the logo that we have right there, you see the person on the backpack, and Joseph Campbell back in the 30s and 40s, he was collecting all these myths from all over the world and realized that they had some similarities in common. And really what that is in so many different cultures, you have a call to adventure. Your call to adventure is to go into this type of special world, and you are looking for this secret ultimate relic or amulet that's really going to save the world. And that is your hero's journey. And so I take that to myself very personally, saying that I feel that it is a hero's journey to bring appreciative inquiry into the school systems. It is changing things incrementally, but transformationally. And the special world is the world of the appreciative inquiry lens. And the ultimate boon, or the ultimate thing that we're going to do, is being able to empower schools to have these appreciative conversations. Also, why a trail is, when you're thinking about hiking, that keeps you oriented so you don't get lost. It keeps you on a safe path. And also, we notice that when you start to go down a certain path and more people do it, it wears that trail and it creates an artifact of that way to go. And so whenever we are doing things with the appreciative inquiry, is how can we create these artifacts for later visitation and to make sure that we go from awareness to action. So creating this conversation trail, what is trail? What does it stand for? So the T is for tapping into our strengths. The R is to reframe the past, so you can look at the vision for the future, and you're going to see these themes of appreciative inquiry. When you ask positive questions, you're going to have a positive outcome. It's about including diverse voices to curate the wisdom of the group. And then finally, listening with an open mind will lead to the collective emotional growth. So that is, when you're thinking about appreciative inquiry as a practitioner, how do you break that down to someone who does not understand that? And how can you bring that into the schools? And it's just really those 5 different concepts. So we're just going to talk about that for a moment. By the way, when we were creating this trail metaphor, I realized AI is literally in the center of the word. Thank you, Deborah. So in thinking of that, then realizing that with the different cycles of the 5D cycle, defining and discover and dreaming and designing and to deploy, or sometimes it's used destiny, realizing that that can repeat itself in the classroom, in hallways, in an IEP meeting, or a special education meeting. And so we're going to see how might we use this and apply it in a variety of ways in the school system. So the first one is the tapping. And so tapping into our strengths, meaning that if you focus on what is working, you're going to see more of that. And people will think, oh, well, if you do something a lot, you'll get better at it. Well, yes. And you have to think about, what are you doing to get better at? And if it's about problem solving, you're going to get really good at knowing what goes into a problem as opposed to actually being solution centered. You get this dopamine rush, and realizing, like, if you're looking for a problem and you're like, I found it, there it is, you actually get happy when you find more problems, and you can get addicted to complaining, and you won't be happy unless you're miserable. And we want to get away from that. So we want to build capacity to look for the good stuff. You think of a student who, you have high at-risk students in education. You have a student information system, and it might have a risk factor. And so on the surface, it looks like the student should not be doing well for whatever reason. But for whatever reason, they're doing great in this one class. Well, instead of focusing on how can we remediate in these areas, yes, you want to do that, but maybe you can best serve the needs of that student by looking about, well, what is it going on in this other class, and then thinking about it that way. So how it shows up in the classroom, classmates are making good choices, and you can say, like, yay, we have a win wall, and you can have sticky notes and have all these praises and support. So you're looking for the good things, tapping into their strengths. In a faculty meeting, teachers and administrators looking at the high point moments during the marking period. We're almost at the end of the marking period now. What went really well? What words are showing up that you want to see more of? And then that way you can start be thinking about that, as opposed to, what do we need to work on? So what I'd like to do is just take a moment and hear from you. Now that you see that tapping into the strengths, do you see any other opportunities how tapping might show up in the school system? You can come off of your mic whenever you like.
What opportunities are you thinking of?
So within the school system, in a classroom, so for example, because you say that you work with educators, like, do you see another opportunity where tapping into strengths and building that momentum, how might that show up for a teacher with their students? Or how might an administrator do that? If you can think of an idea, or maybe you just need to think about it a little bit more, and we can come back to it. But is there anyone who has an idea of how that strength-based approach might get better results than what is currently being done?
I just I just think that if the parents and the teachers have moments together, they could relate and talk about the strengths of the children. And also it's an invitation for the parents to appreciate and to be to put attention on the strengths, which is not necessarily the usage. And I think also the conversation between the teacher and the parents can be very fruitful, because it's like a overarching the relationship with the children, and in which the child feels is considered, is looked in like a person who has strengths, and the two looks, the parents and the teacher looking together at the strengths of the child is, for me, very powerful.
I agree. And today I just sent a positive email home. And sometimes administrators will say that your first contact with a family should be a positive one. And yet we don't get a whole lot of time to do that. So what I would love is, for example, and I'm just thinking of it now, professional development where the students don't come into the building, but the teachers do. Wouldn't it be great to say, we're just going to give you today to contact and send those emails, or leave a little message, and actually give teachers time to do that? Because it's well intentioned, but sometimes it just doesn't happen. But if we had a whole day to just say, please do that, or constant reminders, hey, every day, if you do send home, a couple of emails, by the end of a week or two, you'll have contacted home. Right. Thank you.
I think it goes the other way too. I think teachers need to hear when they do right by a student. Because I know I worked on a project for a school district, and so you had students were not on the core team because they were too busy, but you had parents, teachers, administrators, community members all together, and the teachers were scared to death of the process because they felt that they were going to just hear all the complaints, but instead they hear the stories from the parents of when they did a good job for their student. And this district did a wonderful job of creating a video space on their website where they invited people to tell their stories of when the school had done right by a student. And it just lifted everybody up because it kind of transformed how they thought about themselves.
And I can echo that, because we had a focus group in order to different focus groups to find a new superintendent for our school district. And I attended the community focus group and the parent focus group and the teacher. And I was a little concerned. Well, what are the parents going to say in this focus group? Are they going to? And they were all supportive. And I never would have known that were it not for that focus group.
Right.
I wish more people had attended it, but yes, I echo that. I validate that. So the next one is reframing the past, creating a vision of the future. And so very similar, all these T.R.A.I.L, they bleed together. So they're similar. This one, though, is really like starting to think about the past as a way to actually create the future. And sometimes I feel that that's a little bit missing. We focus on what we want versus what we want to avoid, what has been working well, have that positive tapping into the strengths, but then using that to do a little bit of like visioning and action research. There will always be problems if we look for them. So let's look for the strengths to get us where we want to be. And so what that might look like is a teacher who is noticing that a student is usually late, but there was a positive outlier. And on this Tuesday, like, what is it that I'm so pleased that you were able to show up today. I was wondering, like, what made that possible? And maybe they would explain, well, I was able to get a ride with so-and-so. Oh, really? Well, do you think they'd be open to doing that more often? Or, you just never know until you ask a positive question. Another one is to be thinking about a time when everyone was doing well. What lesson plan went really, really well? And how could we create more of that in the future? So it's not just celebrating what's going well, but with intentional design of what's going to happen in the future. So is there anything there that someone would like to think, oh, I can see another opportunity there, where reframing it, focusing on future as opposed to problems in the past that we need to solve? Anybody have an idea? Not quite? You didn't know I was going to put you to work on a Friday, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll
Yes,
come. Go ahead, Federico.
No, it's, I mean, you say so well that it's difficult to come with something better that I would say. That's what I'm thinking about right now. I said, yeah, I agree totally with that. Whatever way will be possible, that is something that it doesn't come at this very moment, but maybe later on.
Well, and that's great too, because I will have a special invitation at the end of the deck. So, so when you think of it, you can share it later. So again, asking positive questions. Everyone here was putting 5s, but this is being recorded, so some people may not have ever heard of this before. So I still want to go through all of this. Is when you ask the positive question, you're going to get a positive answer, and focusing on the strength is so foundational. And really, that is at the heart of a trail of conversation. So what does that look like in K12? Is that a teacher asks a student, what is something that you were once new at and now you're an expert? What did you do to support yourself? How can you use those same skills? And to really ask positive questions to the students. I might say to them, reflecting, I do this every marking period. I have strength-based reflections, and what went really well for you this marking period, and what went into that. And they're talking about, well, I did better time management, or I asked you for help, or I was a self-advocate. And so really giving them an opportunity to do that. You could do that the same thing with the observation. When an administrator comes into a classroom and say, what went really well? What would you like to see more of that? Someone also was talking about having those positive conversations. An IEP meeting, which is an individualized education plan for special ed students who have an identified learning disability. Right there, even that word disability. Well, what if we did the positive opposite and had an ability meeting, right? And really leveraging that. So a student who might have written expression issues, writing is so tough because it's built in with so much of their self-esteem and maybe negative experiences. But to say, well, you're a really good artist, why don't you draw it? Make a picture, and then just explain to me, what were you trying to depict there? And guess what? They're still formulating the thoughts. It's just in a different way. So do you see any other examples of how that positive question, what type of positive question do you think we need in education right now? Who could we ask?
Well, I think that what is missing, to my point of view, what is missing in the classroom is a duo, at least, of teachers. I think it's very difficult to be alone, and so many teachers are alone in front of their classes. And see what's going on in France with these teachers who are killed. But anyway, I think that creating duos of teachers who would have appreciative conversations on what they do well in their classroom, and create and amplify the notion of duos. And I think that, okay, economically it's not maybe feasible to have two teachers, but I don't care, because I think we have to overcome this so-called financial difficulties to invest in something new for the teachers and for the education in the future. So I would love to see duos and teachers not alone, and having appreciative conversations, and creating links between each other by asking questions on how they succeeded, what they did well with children, and so on. So build upon this conversation to create what I really would like to see, the duos, or at least many, not to be alone. That's it.
Thank you. Here in the United States, yes, you mentioned economically, like to double the staff would be very expensive. And we are getting creative on how we might do that. There are team taught. Sometimes you have a reading specialist in with a content area. We have now instructional coaches, and that has a huge opportunity where they're not there all the time. But if I say, hey, I'm working on this one lesson, and I really want to have students use more better style in their writing. That I did that a couple weeks ago. I said, I noticed students don't really understand what good style is in writing. Do you have some ideas? That teacher came in, did some activities. I was watching how she was doing it. I could have done it myself, but she supported me because I was working in other areas. And I said, this is a goal. Can you support me? Absolutely. And she came in. And then she can come in like a month later and see the growth that maybe I didn't necessarily notice because I see them every day. And she'd say, oh my gosh, look at what they were able to do. Like, this is great. So it's happening on some levels. And I think maybe to your point, one question might be, how can we get creative so teachers don't feel alone in their classroom? We have professional learning communities where maybe there's not necessarily another teacher in the classroom, but after I did things with my class, I can then unpack it with another colleague and say, hey, I did this and it went really well. Maybe you want to try that. Or I'm struggling in this area. What have you done that's worked? As opposed to just commiserating, oh yeah, my students don't know what a thesis sentence is. Oh, they're not doing their homework with their math. And instead of just corroborating on the problem, but to really be a collaborative environment. And it could be as simple as having a Google Drive and say, hey, here's all my resources. Let's crowdsource it. It's open source. It's not my lesson or my handouts. We're all in this together. So how can we shift the attitude of not being so territorial and being collaborative?
That's the issue, Jennifer. I'm just thinking about my young times when I was a high school teacher. And, we work as totally independent. The math subject, history subject, we never talked to each other about what we were doing with the same students. Isn't that horrible? But that's the way we function. And a little bit is happening at the university level right now. There is not that much talking. So you are pointing out to something that is really, really revealing, transformative, challenging, and maybe the way to go. We need to create this sense of collaboration and foster collaboration among teachers that teach the subjects to the same students, and to communicate more, to be more what I would say coherent is not a way, but yeah, maybe in the way we teach and how we can help that particular student that is struggling in my class but not in the other. Oh my goodness, I see the potential here. It will be totally transformative what you are suggesting here right now of education, and it's possible. But oh my, it's a new way of teaching. It's a new way of teaching, and actually, it's not a way the word to use teaching. It's a new way of facilitating, collaborating to promote meaningful learning. You know, that will be the way we will be wording these kind of things from the appreciative paradigm. It's a new way of talking. Change the language we use in our faculty meeting, and everything. I mean, this is totally transformative. We are talking about something new that in education that need to emerge. I wish, this is one of my wishes now, that I knew about this appreciative paradigm when I was really young, and I studied to become a teacher. Personally, I'm just at school, okay? We were put in the school after 3 years of training to be a teacher. Now, 2 weeks and they are already teaching faculty. I don't understand. There is another issue here that I don't want to get into, but and you know, just to mention, university professors don't have any teaching training. They put it there, just finish the doctoral PhD. Because of that, you are knowing about one subject is quite different from teaching it to high school students, even university students. But this is, again, I don't want to go on, because you are talking about something totally transformative. Let's put it this way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I've been looking at my phone with the time, because I realized I'm at the end. So there's no webinar after me. So I don't want to rush it. And so if you need to leave, I respect that, but I don't want to just rush through in the next couple of minutes. So with your permission, like, I'll want to create enough space because there's no one after me. So I would argue too that in academia and college, because of the whole publish and perish, and there's a lot of one thing about in the K12 space, and especially with unions and tenure, there's not a whole lot of competition. But in academia, it's like you really need to get your name out there. That's, I think, a lot more political within the system. And if that is the thing that's kind of hanging over people, and then that might be setting a certain tone within their classes and how they teach. But to realize that we're not competing against each other, we are supporting each other. The abundance mindset: when I succeed, you succeed, all of our classes, all of our students are succeeding. So, to be non-competitive, I think, is really, really important. For including diverse voices, now this is where I get a little nerdy, is we get our clues from nature. And that's a big thing from appreciative inquiry is, things are heliotropic. They grow to the light and flourish in the light. And in looking at nature, that can unlock what we should be doing. I mean, it's a kindergarten, right? We are growing children, and let's look at how things thrive. Is when you look at this permaculture principles, which is the picture that I have right there, where is the most abundant growth and fertile soil is when you have the water meets the land. And also, how do you make sure that crops don't get depleted and burnt out? You have multiple crops, right? You don't just plant the same thing over and over again. So when you think about that as people too. When you have conflicting opinions, now you have an opportunity to really grow. When you have diverse perspectives, if everyone is always in an agreement, we're just going to continue and perpetuate something that we maybe need to be shifting and changing. And when you think about that, in nature, you have to adapt, you have to change. And when you adapt and continue to evolve, that is what is going to be sustainable within a school system. So what that has to do is when you bring in teachers and parents and have conversations, the more you do it, the less scary it's going to be. It's how you build trust and it's how you build relationships. And when you have different perspectives, and how can I honor other people's points of view and still hold to my own? And if we are all doing that regularly, then we can start to appreciate the differences, and that's what makes us a flourishing culture. So what does that look like in a school system? Is when you are creating a committee and you invite all different people into the committee, and you have a survey or a focus group and you're theming them together. And I love to use word clouds in Mentimeter. You can take everyone's responses and dump it together, and you see big words, and the bigger the word is, now you're having themes, and we can talk about it. And you could have appreciative interviews and say, okay, what were some of these words that were showing up? And you can have conversations about it. And what's so important, I've done this with students, and I've done this in strategic planning with schools. Every voice is heard, because you can say, okay, what do you think is going on with these larger words? But then you can also say, I wonder what some of these other words, these outliers, and it was a unique perspective. What do you think is going on there? Well, a person could say, well, I put that because, or someone else might say, well, I never really thought about it that way, but now that I see this other word, it makes me think about this. So everyone's voice can be heard. Not everyone is an extrovert. And to be able to have a one-on-one appreciative interview conversation about a topic, and then immediately seeing it up there and having other people talk about your word without having to be the one to say it, can be, talking about that word, absolutely transformational. And everyone can be part of this, whether you're able to be on a committee or not. Same thing with the family engagement activities. And you bring people together. There's so many things that have to be planned. And then as an administrator, they're always trying to make decisions. Well, what should I do about this? What should I do about that? Why don't you ask the people who are most affected? You don't have to do all that work. Ask the people and trust their brilliance, and that it's going to be bubbling up. So I'm wondering, for you all, and especially there were some people who had the DEI workshop, knowing that you're asking these questions and including diverse voices, do you have any other ways that you can envision using the I part of the T.R.A.I.L framework?
I just wanted to say, I put it in chat, but I just love what you're doing, and I really feel like this needs to be in every school. And everything that you're saying, it just makes complete sense. And fantastic. And I have to jump off, but I just wanted to put that out there. Really awesome. So I hope we can stay connected, and thank you so much.
Absolutely. And then I have my email is right there too. Jennifer@Genformation is my personal email. And then the Trail of Conversations is the book email. So you can always contact me there too.
I appreciate you so much. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Have a good day. How about other people? As far as including diverse voices, how that might show up?
Earlier on in this afternoon, I had a session about talking circles and appreciative inquiry. And I think it's a wonderful way to include everybody and to help everyone in the circle feel the equivalence of the talk. And it's really great.
Thank you. And that's why I have the circle in my hero's journey. It is cyclical. It happens again and again, and it repeats, and there's no beginning and there's no end. And I think the circle is such a mystical, beautiful shape because it shows so many different things. Again, in nature, the cycle of the different seasons, and they repeat over and over again. And it shows the beauty of, if you don't get it right this time, there's another chance, and we're constantly evolving. There's no end point. And it can show transformation when you go around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then the, go ahead.
You have a book on with all this stuff?
Yes, I currently have the mini book. It's about 30 pages, and then we're working with a publisher, and we are going to be, the plan is to have the full manuscript and in publication for the end of this school year, so that way people can have it and do a book study in the summer.
Wow.
So
that needs to be spread all over.
Thank you.
And to be known by school systems. You have in front of you a big opportunity indeed to change, make a significant change. I can see how sending this book to our school district here will be one way. Are you promoting this with the school districts?
Yes, we have been doing this work. We've been doing this now for about 3 years, and collecting case studies and speaking at different conferences. We need to be doing it more. It's just my partner and I, but like I said, now that we're going to be publishing with a publishing company, and really, I don't like the word, but marketing, like you have to market it to get the word out. So one intention that we set was, let's create a community before we start enlisting calls to action for that. So I have an area, a call actually for you all to join our community. It's a Facebook group, and to get the word out. But that's where we're going to really start to get these robust conversations, so that people will want to bring us in and do the work. So here, listening for collective emotional growth, open minds and open hearts. To understand, I feel that we are right on the brink of a collective transformation of consciousness. I think there's a lot more heart-centered conversations that are going on. I think people are really hungry for understanding their deepest purpose, right? And for us to support them on that. And so really listening to validate each other, and to know that people were understood, and seeking to understand and asking those types of questions of, that's interesting, can you tell me more about that? Or, I'd like to understand, can you give me an example? And to really listen, and knowing that, trusting that their reason for doing that is to build those relationships. And it really strengthens our communities. I am a big proponent of diversity work. And I had a conversation with a woman who really was opposed to diversity work. And I sat down and I met with her. And she had emailed me, because we were on a focus group together, and I had said certain things that she did not agree with. She sent me an email. I said, let's have lunch. We met, and I listened to her, and she said, I didn't think you were going to email me back. I certainly didn't think we were going to have lunch together. And I wanted to know where she was getting her information. I wanted to know why she thought that way. And once I explained to her my definition of diversity and how I look at it, She said, I never thought about it that way. And I can see now and I can understand now. And we asked each other questions, and it would have been very easy to just draw a line and say, nope, I'm not going to play in this sandbox. But instead of me trying to convince her about my way, I wanted to know where she was coming from. And once I understood that and I had empathy for her, then we could have a conversation. So in thinking of that L part, listening, students are in a writing workshop and they're listening, they're acknowledging each other and validating on suggestions where they can add more opportunities of what they loved. So it's like, oh, instead of you did this wrong, you need to fix this. You know, what one paragraph really came alive and made your essay sing? How can we do more of that in the future or when you revise? Now, this one, knock your socks off, during a school board meeting where everyone gets their 2 to 3 minutes. What if the school board said, thank you, and what I heard you say was this, and what I really like about your comment was this, and actually reflect back to each other at a school board meeting? I've yet to see that. Do you have other ideas of how that listening with an open heart and seeking to understand might transform our schools?
The issue for me always is here, maybe for us. I mean, you are, as we say, you are preaching to the choir. We know all these things. For me, the point is how we translate this into practice. I mean, I can see you in high school. When I was in high school, thinking my students, I mean, listening for them was not something they worry, they are concerned about. You know, it was, you know, always thinking about how doing something to the one that is in front of them, and you know, these kind of things. You know, I'm talking about a little more, I mean, but kind of superficial. But I can see the most important thing for me, I remember, was to make sure that they were just listening to how I wanted them to understand algebra. Because they would get so distracted that much, and just we never talk about these personal issues, because that was not the subject of the I was supposed to teach, you know. So we are coming back to the same thing. In what classes in high school do you teach listening, Jennifer? Who is teaching listening in high school? Nobody.
Well, I think it's through modeling, right? So I think a good educator is listening to their students and
Yeah.
metacognitively showing, now, do you see what I did right there? Right. And I'm having them on the way out. I'm the end of the road before they graduate. But I show listening by meeting with my students one-on-one every couple of weeks while they're doing some group work, and I call them over and they see that I'm really listening to them, and I follow up and I take notes on the conversation, and I say, hey, when you told me that last week, how's it going? So I do that.
Are we using some time space, if you want to put it this way, to address this issue as to create this moment of reflection, meditation, understanding of what teaching is all about and why it's important? Because again, practice without theory is not that powerful. So you know what I'm talking about? It's a little complicated, the way I put it, but I can see modeling. Yeah, no, I am, but I think still at the high school level, even elementary school, we need to, you know, the curricula should be totally, again, we are talking about revolutionizing everything. So, but I'm talking about who teach listening in high school? In what classes, in what subject, when that is becoming a time where students focus on and reflect deeper to the point that they get an understanding theoretically, intuitively about the importance of listening. They hear the word about from parents, listen to me when I talk to you, and you have to do the same thing to the teachers. But more than that is what I'm thinking about. It will be possible? It is necessary? What do you think? I think
well, I mean, I do appreciative interviews in my class from time to
yes.
time, and that's a listening skill. No crosstalk. You know, write down what they said, ask clarifying questions, and I think some of it might be, and to get professors of education to do studies, because unless it's evidence-based, you know, it's a harder sell, right? So this is anecdotal, this is qualitative, but how does listening translate into higher test scores, right? That's what they're looking for. So we need to be doing
Yes.
this in schools. We need to be doing a longitudinal study to say that those districts who have brought in the appreciative mindset and facilitated strength-based conversations in all areas of the school system are showing an increased sense of belonging, are showing more attendance because of that. When they're in classes more often, now they're receiving more instruction. It's not punitive discipline where they're being expelled or having suspensions. And, you know, it's basically what I am attempting to do in looking at all these different areas, school boards, students, families, paraprofessionals. We are setting up the dominoes, and then we start knocking them down, and we see that chain reaction in a positive way, right? So that's what we need to do, is we need to get schools committed to take a chance on doing something differently. And let's collect the data to show that in a couple of years, it's to have the outcomes that they've been seeking for so many years. To buy a certain product or a certain curriculum, when the brilliance is within all of us, and we don't necessarily need that bell and whistle. It's human-centered, student-centered, heart-centered through these conversations. So if it were with more people, I would have put people into breakout rooms, and we are coming towards the end. The question that I had is, how do you see it showing up? We've already done that here in the main room here. So the call to action, we did start a couple minutes late, so we're still about on an hour, so I thank you, is our free mini book that we have. Is if you go on to a.trailofconversations.com, it's about 30 pages. It's very visual. It's a quick read, and I have my partner Heidi and I have put together all these different questions that administrators and teachers could start asking today. And if people can DIY it and can do it on their own, then that just means that we were very clear in our writing on how to do it. So we want people to be able to independently do this. So please tell people about it, and people can reach out. And then it is with the hope that we can work and coach administrators one-on-one. How can we do this? How to have school summits and bring people together and have these opportunities to set, how do I want to say, like we have the overarching question, we have this affirmative topic, and then how do we design it and deploy that over time and keep on monitoring it and iterating it and adapting it. The other thing is join our Facebook group. It's a Trail of Conversations, and tell other people to join, invite all your friends. And we just started really committing to developing this community. You can post questions, you can pose things. And then also reaching out to school leaders. One thing that I've learned about the appreciative inquiry groups is that so many people have connections, and you may have someone that that is in a position to bring us in and do professional development, or to speak to a cabinet and say, how are you doing your strategic planning? Are you open to discovering a new way? So that is my call to action as we are all embarking upon this hero's journey of creating a trail of conversations. So I thank you. So I'm wondering, do you have any questions? Yes.
I have no questions, but I think that it's really brave to propose that, and bravo, because we have been discussing about education in France with practitioner colleagues for ages, and I'm not very much in that activity, but I really think I will share the reference to other colleagues that are in the education and want to influence in education. And I'm going to bed now because it's past midnight. I'm very tired. But thank you so much. Goodbye, Federico. Salut, Florence. Merci d'avoir été là aussi. And thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you.
night for those who are too late. Florence, it's too late for you, Florence.
Yes, I want to go to bed.
Yeah, it's
Wow.
midnight for you too, right?
No, it's 9 for you to wake up. It's new day already.
Quelle heure il est chez toi, Florence?
Bah, comme en France.
Comme moi, ça, mais t'es à Luxembourg, hein, c'est ça? Ok.
Donc, c'est le même fuseau.
C'est ça.
Bravo, Jennifer. That was an inspiring and fascinating presentation.
Yeah.
I like your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are very young. You have all the future in front of you. I can